first of all, man, I gotta say I can't believe I'm sitting here with you. I really wasn't sure if I was talking to the real Sean Rector, right? Because it's social media, people make weird profiles and stuff. So that's no joke. I really until you popped up here, I wasn't like 100% sure you were gonna be here. So before we get to it, I got to fanboy out just for a few seconds because I've been a Survivor fan my entire life almost. So I was first introduced to you in like I think it was like 2002, and you were to me like literally the first, like, for lack of a better term, just like the cool guy on Survivor, right? Because at least in the way that I identify with cool, because you had like good old boy Colby or the soccer player Ethan, but you were different. You stood out, you spoke your mind, and you spoke it on race in a time that it wasn't necessarily popular to do so, whereas now it's a very common thing. It's actually very common, getting more common on the show, but you were the very first one to do that. And you literally made history on the show because you and V just engineered that just massive blindside that turned the entire game around. And that was the first time that it ever happened. And that was just such a cool move. And you almost won, but all right. Anyway, so I'm here more for the rest of your story, right? So here on the podcast, we highlight good men, sometimes women, but we generally focus on the men because we think women already do a very good job of leading by example and showing that it's okay to be emotional and okay to just be a good person in their lives, right? And so, Sean, I want to highlight you this week as our man of the week because you've literally dedicated your life to this, like the mantra that we run by. You've created this booming foundation that essentially takes these at-risk boys and teach them to be these educated, upstanding gentlemen. And then on top of that, you've been extremely active in raising awareness on these social injustices and working towards making the world as a whole better. So from the bottom of my heart, I want to thank you.
I received that. I'm humbled by that, man. Thank you. I don't take compliments well. I'm always like, damn, who is he talking about? But I appreciate that, man. Thank you. Thank you.
So let's dive into you as a youth, right? Because I want to get to this kind of story of how you came to make this foundation. So I remember you saying I too was raised by a single mom. You were raised by a single mom in Harlem. How did that kind of help you kind of shape yourself to this person you are now, where you want to just be this caretaker and make sure everyone's kind of living to their potential of excellence?
So I just want to say thanks for having me. I didn't know that there were people out there that knew about me, cared about my views, or even in the Survivor world as fans, as weird as that sounds, saying people who are fans, I'm always like, wow, they still exist? Because, I've had such a contentious relationship with Survivor, CBS, Jeff, Mark, the whole nine. So because I distance myself, I'm always surprised.
Survivor, the subreddit of Survivor loves you still.
I don't know that. And that's why I said when I meet people like you who tell me, Rob Sestanino, who since we've been doing these, I've been co-hosting with him these get-togethers. We'll talk offline. Every now and then he'll say, "No, dude, there's some people out there that because you gotta remember, I said I was getting death threats and like this.
We'll get into all that. That's insane to me.
Yeah, I was getting. I mean, this before social media, so they were coming straight to me, and like you said, because I was open about race and my views, whether they were popular or not, we clearly see. I mean, we didn't have to see the presidential debate the other day, but those of us that are, we just know, like, and everyone knows, it's just a matter of it's like the open secret that in this country, if you're an outspoken Black man specifically, you're targeted. It doesn't matter what you're saying. If you're just outspoken about your feelings, about whatever, your truth, there are segments of this society that would rather you just shut up and dribble. And so that to me is surprising when I do see non-Black people specifically who are like, yo, I could see your humanity beyond the sound bites or just you on a show where you don't have food or water. Like the context of Survivor to me matters. So like I said, that's humbling. My youth, yes, I have a big family though. Cause Black families it's not nuclear. It's not traditional. It's mama, auntie, the man down the street. Our families are by extension. And that's historical even, from slavery on. Like we've had to. So I never felt like the single mom thing per se, although within a big family, me and mom still had to make it happen. So I just remember wondering, where's my dad? Like I remember, you know, crying sometimes, and you know, whether it was me getting a butt whooping from my mom, and you know, the kid in me is like, nah, I wish I had my dad to step in, or like watching my mom struggling, you know, especially during that time in the 80s. It was something about that 80s with Reaganomics. Not that I know what to call it at that time. It was just, we were struggling. But because the economy was kind of bad, crack had hit our neighborhoods. It was a real weird time, 70s and 80s. And so I just watched a strong Black woman, and I have them all throughout my family, but because my mom was raising me, do what she had to do. So what she did was, while she was trying to get her college degree, I went with a Dominican babysitter. So I speak Spanish because, you know, growing up in New York is different than most places in the country where integration is really integration. Like your neighborhood literally could have about, you know, 5, 6 different countries on one block. So this Dominican woman, Carmela Pollo, helped raise me. And so here I am, this little bilingual Black kid. And in New York, you're not Black, white, you just who you are. Because literally there are people darker than me that speak Spanish. There are people lighter than me who speak Russian. Like New York is really an interesting place to grow up on. I just happened to be in the Bronx at that time with my mom. So fast forward, we get through that time period where I spent a lot of time with my abuelita. I didn't consider her a niñera, which is a babysitter in Spanish. So, you know, I'm like any kid being raised, especially in Harlem at that time, just trying to figure out public schools. Then in 85, my mother somehow, I don't know how she heard about the Milton Hershey School, boarding school. The only thing I knew about boarding school was like The Facts of Life, that TV show, and like, you know, just what you would hear, like, oh, you're bad, you're getting sent to this boarding school. It was like, I didn't want to leave, you know, middle school. I went and tested, and then I got accepted. And I get into this school, and here I am, kind of culture shock in that I'm 13 years old, I'm from Harlem, and I get these 2 white house parents, Mr. and Mrs. Battles, may she rest in peace. And in Milton Hershey, when you get accepted, the boys are in one home, the girls are in another, and your house parents get introduced to you, and these are basically your house parents while you're living there. So I was like, it was a hard, for 2 weeks, I almost got kicked out. I got into a fight with the house father. The rules were a little weird to me. I felt like they were picking on me. You know, it was all of that sensitivity, plus just culture shock. 4 years later, I graduate from Milton Hershey. Miss Battles, Mr. and Mrs. Battles is probably outside of my own family and abuela, the greatest thing that could have happened to me. You know, they helped shape me during my formative teenage years. Mr. Battle, I saw him as the father. Like, he was the father figure for a lot of us, but he had that stern, firm thing that allowed me to model what a father does. And he had a house with like 16 boys from all demographics, wilding out. And then Miss Battles was that, like, she just had what abuela had. And it was like, she just had that thing. So I say all that because my mother, as a single mom, had to navigate through these different stages of my life, trusting my upbringing with other people by default. You know, like, I'm working, so I need help. Or during the 80s when crack in New York got bad, and my mom was like, I got to get my son out of here. She trusted me to the Milton Hershey School. And so, you know, I've always been in debt to my mom, and vowed that, you know, even when I was a kid, if I was to ever be a father, and be the dad that mine wasn't, you know, absent, that I would dedicate my life to my own children, but also be very sensitive to those children who needed that extra support, and specifically single moms.
That's really cool. Yeah, like I said, I grew up with a single mom too, who also put herself through college when I was younger. So, but you know, with the age gap between us, I think that's an incredible testament that you said was it the Bronx or Harlem you grew up, right? That in
Bronx
Harlem,
and Harlem, yeah.
He is a single mom in, I'm guessing, what, the early 80s that puts herself through college. That's incredible, like, for that time period.
Yeah, Mom Dukes was doing it. But see, we come from a family of educators. It wasn't like education was new in our family. It's just, you know, my great grandmother and grandfather migrated from Barbados, and they were teachers, they educators, and they came over, and education was a must in our family. So seeing people with college degrees and smart and just intelligent and political was normal. You know, my grandfather's from Virginia. The Rector side of us were sharecroppers, and so he met my grandmother in Harlem, and they had 9 children, of which one was my mom. And so, you know, we just come from a family of hard workers, educators. You know, when you're a kid, you don't know what sacrifice is. You don't know what your parents are sacrificing for you. You just, you know, most kids selfishly just wanting. And so it's not until retrospect. But for me, retrospect came early because I don't know about you, and maybe you can touch on it. When you're growing up with a single parent, it's almost like there are times where you are brother and sister like. I mean, it's not like disrespectful, like I don't see them as my parent, but like you rely on each other. Like my mom and I grew up watching the Knicks together, laughing, you know, yelling, cussing, you know, together on the couch, watching our Knicks when we had Bernard King, and we grew up watching comedy shows. And
Sure.
I would sneak and watch Benny Hill. I don't know if people remember that, but he was like this comedian from the UK who his show was raunchy. It would have all this sexual innuendo, but he was like a comedian. My mom would kind of be like, "You're not watching that." So we had this like brotherly, sisterly at time relationship. And so there were moments though when I knew when things weren't so rosy, when I couldn't afford to be a kid, whether it was walking in and seeing her with bills on the bed and trying to figure out which one to pay, or, you know, telling me, you know, "Hey babe, I don't know if we're gonna be able to pay the rent," or, you know, just, it just was one of those things where there were times when things were not hidden from me and I had to grow up quick. And it was like, all right. So my first job at Yankee Stadium, that was my first job at 13. I was a vendor. And I remember when I would come home, I would give her all of my tip money. Just be like, "Yo, you know, whatever you can give me back, Mom, just give me a few dollars back." But at that early age in my life, I knew, I got to help out. You know, we're in this together. So.
Yeah, wow, that's a early life lesson. I resonate though with that kind of brother-sister relationship. My mom's, you know, 19 years older than me, so she kind of was growing up while I was, right? So that very much resonates with kind of, you know, getting through these life hurdles and reaching milestones. And like where yours was Benny Hill, we would be watching like Seinfeld, right? Because that was when I was younger.
Okay.
So yeah, that totally resonates with me. But
I think I aged myself with that Benny Hill reference.
it's all right. You look better than me. But anyway, so question for you about the Hershey School, right? So you said you went in there, white family, had a little bit of kind of rift conflict initially. Did you have a lot of close white friends prior to, you know, your age 13?
No. So when I say growing up in New York, New York is a very integrated city, but it's still a city of neighborhoods. And just depending on what neighborhood you grew in. So all my friends were Puerto Rican, Dominican, West Indian, just variations of Black. The only white kids, like I was in this art program that we would get bused downtown Manhattan. And so my white friends that were in that program with me, we would kick it. And, you know, so because I was in a lot of activities, I was in the Boy Scouts, Cub Scouts, cadets, military cadets, played ball. Like my mother had me in so many things. The interaction, I remember I went to a predominantly white sleepaway camp. It was one of the worst decisions ever. Complete, all kinds of racist kids. Like my introduction to racism outside of just living in New York and seeing the BS that happens growing up there with racism and prejudice. I went to in terms of connecting with other youth that were white, I went to, the irony was a Native American camp. I think it was called Orenda and something else. I forgot it was a company in New York. Anyway, we get sent to this predominantly white sleepaway camp, and the kids would it felt like the KKK summer camp. And so my indoctrination being around a bunch of white folks was like, nah, I'm good. Especially kids, because they would, not only, it was beyond mean, it was like N-word, putting stuff in your sleeping bag. And then when the Black kids would retaliate, the majority white counselors, as the cops always do, would grab us and we would be reprimanded. We'd be like, "Yo, y'all not even And so it was this feeling like, yo, get me out of here, man. This is crazy. And so,
How old
but
were
I'm
you?
one of those people. I'm sorry.
How old were you during that?
Oh, man, I was like 7.
Jesus.
I was, yeah, 7, 8. Like, I was going to sleepaway camp since the age of 6. And then I went after that, predominantly black sleepaway camp called Menacing Townhouse. It was in Harlem. Best decision ever, because what I realized is it felt good. I don't mean black people are monolith and that we all can get along, but a lot of times when you don't have to deal with other people's racism and prejudice, you could just not like someone because you don't like them. You could just be like, you could use some other adjective, you know, other than the one that you're like always like, is this some racial prejudice thing? And so before Milton Hershey, but I also never lumped everyone based on one experience. I mean, in general, I knew our collective history racially, but I'm the kind of dude where if you cool with me, I'm cool with you. So that's why when I went to Milton Hershey, immediately I bonded with my boy Mike Troisi. May he rest in peace. 16 years old, died of cancer. Italian boy from Youngstown, Ohio.
Wow.
And we bonded because of hip hop and basketball, girls. It was just cool. Like he always reminded me of again, I'm gonna date myself. Happy Days. It was a character named Chachi.
I know Chachi.
And, anyway, I say that because kind of like my relationship with Boston Rob. Actually, Boston Rob reminds me a lot of my boy Mike in that.
So you're saying
you know,
Boston Rob's Chachi. I got it.
Yeah, to a certain extent. But you know, like that blue collar.
Yeah.
Kind of just you know, especially if you're from a city, you know, or a blue collar city where your parents work, there might be, you know, there's always going to be tension, whether it's racial or class or whatever. But I think if you can find commonality with people in y'all bond, then I think you can supersede some of the differences. And so I was able to do that at Milton Hershey.
Isn't it wild that after 30, 35 years, someone made such a big impact on you in that kind of time frame that name still just rolls off the tip of your tongue?
Which one? Which name?
Your friend that you bonded with, right?
Oh, Mike. Oh, he's etched in my heart. Well, you got to understand, Milton Hershey School is, everyone out there who identifies, we call ourselves Milts. The school opened in the early 1900s and it was all white, all male. And they called us orphans, but it was Milton Hershey had this endowment to create this school for kids who were in need, blah, blah, blah. You fast forward, it was integrated in the 70s, and then women were added also in that 70s realm. So when I got there, you know, there was Latinos, black, white women, and we bonded because we had to milk cows. What people don't know about me, every day, let me just repeat, every day that I was at Milton Hershey, we had to wake up 5 a.m. in the morning, milk cows, bale hay, scrape crap, drive tractors. Like this city boy was doing farm work at Milton Hershey with my other brothers and sisters at the school. And then we would come in and have to do house chores. And so the experience at Milton Hershey bound most of us in a once in a lifetime opportunity, so that it's one of the few rare safe spaces I feel with a whole bunch of people of different nationalities. Like when you get around Milton Hershey, usually around homecoming or just wherever, we could be anywhere. We act like no one is around. It's a beautiful thing to watch. And these are some of my friends who are hardcore Republicans, super conservative. But, you know, once you have a bond once in your life with a group of people, you understand politically we'll probably be different in certain things. Like, I think we just understand to humanize each other and have basic decency and respect, even if my views are like far left and yours are far right. So yeah, when I say Mike Troisi, he was my first best friend there, and he died. He had cancer in his knee. It is, you know, it was like, you know, you don't think of death. He had acquired it playing. We were playing ball. We thought it was an injury in his knee, and it spread, and he ended up passing away. So myself and others will never. So whenever I say his name and say rest in peace, I always think about my boy Mike.
Yeah, it's a shame. So 70s, you're in this school that seems incredibly progressive for the time. Was there any other ones like that?
So 85, not 70s. When I say 70s, 80s, that's my growing up.
I mean, it became integrated in the 70s. Sorry.
Oh, okay. So the school,
like,
yeah,
progressive. That's awesome.
Yeah, in the 70s, they allowed, it was first black males because it was all boys.
Yeah.
and then girls. Yeah, super progressive at that time. Think about the parents who relinquished their kids in this school not knowing,
Uh-huh.
but you get the brochure, you go, hey, I'm gonna roll the dice. If my kid gets a better situation here, and slowly but surely, you know, and this is the beauty of true diversity. You know, once the board becomes more diverse, you have diverse voices and you have diverse opinions that say, hey, we need some more people, and stop making this one monolithic, one demographic thing, you know, because it was all white males since the early 1900s. So it was like 50, 60, 70 years. But let me tell you the beautiful thing about Milton Hershey. This has truly happened. It's kind of interesting in this racial climate. There will be a Milton Hershey graduate from like the 50s. And so you can imagine, even if they went to Milton Hershey, they may have just been part of the societal energy with black and white. They may have been hardcore racists. Who knows? You can only imagine that prejudice was alive and well. And it was probably just normalized, even from people who were good. If you graduated from Milton Hershey, and we normally would wear a class ring, if there's an acknowledgement that you went to Milton Hershey, hands down, you're brought in like family. And we'll talk for hours. I remember we were at a gas station on our way up to homecoming, and there was a guy from class of like late 50, I don't say 58, old white dude. And we were about to pump gas. He kept staring at us, and we're like, yo, what is this? Man, what is it? And then we were all joking around as we normally do. And it was like, he must have saw our ring, and we're called homeboys. So, and this is before the whole colloquial term of what homeboys in our culture. He was like, are you guys homeboys? We're like, yeah, are you? He had his ring. We were like, yo. We stayed at that gas station for about 30 minutes talking about what the school was like then and now. And he's like, man, if you guys want to come over, like, Milton Hershey is America's best kept secret. It's amazing, the school I went to. And so that's why no matter how hardcore my views people think they are, or whatever people want to label me, I'm cool with some of the most diverse, beautiful people. But I don't like advertising. I don't want to be one of those people like, I have friends who are fill in the blanks. You know, it's just one of those things.
Yeah.
Right. That thing.
Yeah. That's amazing that just the fact that you guys are in this academy, whether it was 30 years apart, that you guys can put differences aside, especially politically, and that can't exist in the real world. Like, I don't expect you to like go over to an outwardly racist person's house, but I think nowadays, if you know someone is incredibly conservative and you're not, like, things are just so tense. Like, I don't think that coexists as well. Like, there's not that level of respect.
Well, I think because there's already common ground. Like, I think if you don't know someone, you should have trepidation. But I think, like you said, we both looked and had on our rings, and it's like, we all understand that Milton and Catherine Hershey were instrumental in all of our lives, because they gave so much to us, no matter what year you were there, that we would be hypocritical to the mission statement if we were prejudiced or hateful or didn't treat each other. Because once you graduate, literally all Milts call each other brothers and sisters. Like, and it's felt. It is a phenomenon. I can't put it in other words. You would have to see it to believe it. Literally in the middle of Hershey, Pennsylvania, every year in September, which would be now, but because of COVID, they had to cancel it. You'll see people converge from all over the country, every age. It's wild. So in this highly volatile, polarized time of racial and people getting sick, COVID, everything that's going on in the economy, it's good to know that I have a space that I can reach out and be in with people who, you know, even if they're politically different or the same. If I go to a town and there's a Milt, I'm taken care of. If Milts come into my city and they need anything, it's like, and it's like a weird, I don't like using the word fraternity, sorority, because that to me is a whole nother thing, but it's like it's truly like a family.
That's awesome. So you milked cows, you did, baled hay. Were there horses that you rode? Because, based on your Survivor experience, it didn't look like you'd ever ridden a horse before.
No, and so, no, I've never ridden. Like I said on the show, the merry-go-rounds in Central Park were the extent of my horses. No, but it were a lot of cows. I'm really good at milking cows, getting that mastitis out. We would play games. I think every now and then, if the dairyman wasn't looking, we would try to do silly stuff in the barn with the cows, like ride them and stuff. I actually helped give birth to a calf.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, me and the dairyman by ourselves, and he's like, Rector, I need your help. I'm like, for what? I'm ready to go take a shower. He's like, she's about to give birth. I'm like, oh, dude. So we had to put these clamps on the calf. I had never seen anything like it. And I'm pulling, and the cow's like, and you can see the cow, she's looking at me like, look, brother, don't mess this up now. And I'm looking like, I'm trying. I'm like a proud papa, as if, right? And I'm pulling, and the calf is coming out. I'm like, these things come out this big? Like, I'm just, oh my God. And the dairyman is in the front, I'm in the back, and we're in this small pen as it is, and the cows are huge. I finally pull out the calf with afterbirth all on me and everything, and the calf is on me. And the cow turned around, started licking the afterbirth, and gave me that look. She gave me a wink. I gave her a wink. It was like, thank you. I was like, I got you, girl, with all kinds of just slime and that, another memorable moment. I'm like, here I am, a city kid from Harlem, and I helped get birth this calf. So yeah, I got a lot of farm stuff.
Cool. Is that where you got into kind of the musical theater side of yourself?
No, that's way before. So my mom, back in the day, they call hoofers. My mom was like a showgirl, tap dance. She was a hoofer. She danced. She hard tapped in. And so growing up in Harlem, I went with, as a single mom, she would drag me everywhere she went because that was my mom. And so we would be in the Cotton Club, the Savoy, Small's Paradise, all those nostalgic Harlem clubs, the Rennie, the Renaissance Theater, we call it the Rennie. And I just got a taste of musical theater early because my mom was a performer. Sometimes she'd bring me on stage with her if I knew some of the steps because she was part of this dance troupe. I just, and then growing up in New York, I used to have a big family, but I was like one of the only, I would be by myself roaming the streets of New York. And sometimes I would sneak into Broadway theaters at intermission. I knew how to hustle that angle. I knew at intermission, they didn't check for tickets. So I would go and always see the second half of a lot of shows and just got bitten by the musical theater bug at an early age.
And then I was reading, I think this was on your school's website, that around this time you had gotten into using theater towards teaching kids about self-esteem issues and drug abuse and that sort of stuff. Is that about?
Yeah, so when I graduated from college, actually, so I went to college, double majored, theater, psych. I come out and just trying to be a working actor. I got with the group called Periwinkle National Theater. It was like a children's theater that toured the country doing plays that dealt with drug abuse, substance abuse within this play. And so the character I played, like many of the other characters, there was only like 5 or 6 of us, but it was a powerful play. What was her name? Sana, the artistic director, her name was Sana Ra something. She was like kind of like a beatnik white lady from the 70s, really cool, kind of hippie chick into social issues, older. She had this program. So we toured the country, and I went to so many states, so many high school, thousands of kids performing this, teaching kids the dangers of substance abuse. And then we would do these Q&As afterward. And I really enjoyed combining acting and activism on that platform.
That's so cool. Yeah, so that was like probably before they even had like Dare and all that stuff, right?
Well, no, because Dare was wasn't that Nancy Reagan in the 80s?
Oh, you're right. Yep, that was the late 80s.
I think, yeah, and when I did mine was in the 90s. So I mean, they may have had those, but our little theater group did what we did, and I'm still proud of that work.
So you clearly have this kind of mindset already at the time. You're in your, I guess, early mid-20s of kind of trying to change the youth. So then how did that then translate to opening up, or at least starting, is it TYME or TYME? Is it TYME?
It's spelled TYME.
Right. So how did you transition from that to actually starting the TYME Foundation?
So I'm an actor. I actually made it to Broadway. As much as I used to sneak in those theaters, I finally made it, and I was with the legendary Bill Irwin. And for folks who don't know who he is, he's the Clown Prince. He was in the Don't Worry, Be Happy video. You can see him. He's Mr. What's his name on Sesame Street? Mr. Watch It With My Daughter. Mr. I can't think of his name. Anyway, he did this play by Moliere, French playwright Moliere, named Scapin. And I was on Broadway at the Roundabout Theater. So after my run on Broadway in that play, my agents were like, yo,
Noodle. Yeah.
huh?
Mr. Noodle. I looked at his picture.
Mr. Noodle, thank you. Oh my God.
Go ahead.
He was also instrumental. Just another dude I so respect. He helped me get my money right because they were trying to shaft me out of some money. And he just gave me my shot. That story, by the way, if I can tell briefly, it's interesting because my agent sent me on this dancing. They never send me auditions dance, even though I can dance. I'm not a formal dancer or whatever. But they send me and I see all these guys in tights looking like they're from Juilliard and some of the high places where you go. And I walk in with my Timberlands, my hat, looking like Leroy from Fame. And I'm like, dang, is this the audition? They're like, yeah. And Bill Irwin was in there. And so he basically just wanted to see if you could freestyle with him. Whatever he did, you did. He put on music. So some of these more formal dances look way too robotic. And it was me and another guy named Hillel Meltzer. Shout out to Hillel, who was in a Broadway show called Blue Man Group. Little Jewish cat with curly afro, looked like I don't want to keep referencing these things. You can tell I was a TV kid. I grew up on 80s TV. Oh, you were too? Okay. You remember Welcome Back, Carter?
I love Welcome Back, Carter. They had a Nick and Naya when I was a kid. I watched.
Oh my God, bring that back. But anyway, so he looked like Horseshack a little bit. But anyway, he and I in there freestyling, doing our thing, mixing not just hip hop, but just movement, just being able to kind of and. I left and forgot all about the audition, and Bill Irwin personally paged me. This is when beepers were out. And I look on my page, and I'm like, yo, who's this? I get to a payphone. I'm like, yo, you paged me? And he's like, yeah, man, we really liked you. I'm like, short story long, because of him, he personally handpicked me to get my Broadway credit. But anyway, my agents after this run was like, yo, you got to go to L.A., go out to L.A., total different landscape, not having a car, having to navigate the gang landscape, the racial landscape, just even auditioning was way different. And so fast forward, I started substitute teaching. Well, first I was with this group called the Bilingual Foundation of the Arts, in which we toured all of Los Angeles. It was a bilingual company, mostly Latino, in which we would do this play called Food for Cool. Remember when the tobacco industry got sued and they kind of had to put money into programs to talk about whatever. So they got this endowment to do this play. I got a chance to go around the city of LA and learn the city doing this play, teaching kids the dangers of smoking. I played this guy named Jose Camel. I was the Jose Camel dude, and I'm going to show you how. It was just real weird. But anyway, I got
basically black Hispanic Joe Camel.
Yes, big time. The hat, the glasses. It was a good message, but it was a good way to learn LA. And I was like, yo, once this run is over, I started substitute teaching. I was like, all right, this is one profession that will give me the freedom. I ended up at this one school, ended up doing a long-term assignment in which you're subbing in one class all year. And my principal was like, yo, you're really good at this. Why don't you get in this teaching credential class? I'm like, I ain't come out here to teach, and I can do this with my eyes closed. He's like, yeah. But I was like, all right. So I got in this teaching credential program. Didn't finish it. Why? Because of Survivor. Like one of my students was like, hey, you should put in this show called Survivor. I'm like, what? I was like, get me the info. And the student came back and was like, yo.
I love that you never watched an episode of it and you just applied and went on.
But no, so two things. Yeah. This coincided, ironically, with so Robin casted. We're the only season, and she's the casting director for Big Brother. For those who don't know, I think Lynn Spielman was pregnant at the time. So this particular season, so I had known Robin like through our circles because of my boy Mike Boogie. Now Mike, I gave Mike. He's
forgot about that guy.
You know, Mike. Okay, so we were all cool before that, and that was my name I gave him. That was one of those names I grew up, and I was like, Mike was like the white guy that hung out with all the brothers. He liked hip hop. He could dance, and we used to get into all the cool Hollywood parties, doing fake names. It was just like, you know, it was kind of like that Milton Hershey mischievous side. I was like, if you could hustle like us, then you can hang. Anyway, so, you know, LA is like New York. It's a big city, but it's small. And I think Robin had told everyone, our group was like 10 of us, 10, 12. Hey, if you guys can put together a tape, there's a show, blah, blah, blah. And in my mind, I'm like, that sounds like the one of my students. You know, in my mind, I didn't share with anybody. I was like, all right. Either way, sent in a tape, made it to the audition, and then, you know, the rest is Survivor history. But I'm tying all that into how I started time.
Yeah.
At that time, while I was teaching, I was also the head basketball coach. So here I am, this kid from New York. You got to remember, as a black man from New York, this isn't even racial. This is like intra-racial stuff. There was the East Coast, West Coast hip hop beef at the time, because I came out in like 98 or 99. Tupac and Biggie, those murders was like 96, 97. Oh, so you shot Tupac? So I ain't tell nobody where I was from. I just, with my thick New York accent, they'd be like, hey, homie, where you from, cuz? And I'm like, oh, I'm from Detroit. I'm just visiting fam. I'd make up some. So I'm in the hood in South Central LA, literally around the corner where Reginald Denny was pulled out of the truck. So I'm in South Central LA. Bloods, Crips, you name it. But I'm at this school. It's not many black male teachers. I then was called to coach. And I played all through high school and even in college, Division III, Albany at that time. Shout out to the Great Danes, they Division I now. But I'm a ball player, coach these kids. My boy Pete, who went to Milton Hershey with me, he was part of that first group that started. Do you remember And One, the company that used to have sneakers? And One, AG. So they sent us a bunch of paraphernalia, sneakers and everything, which was big at that time.
Yeah,
so
I had
our kids were outfitted. Huh?
I said I had And Ones. I played basketball.
Did you? Oh, okay. And then remember the And One mixtape. So it was a point where And One in general was it was on the set and people knew And One. Not so much now. Anyway, these kids that I'm coaching, I got close with. These were from different hoods, so I had to navigate the streets of LA. I used to have to talk to OGs and get permission, like, yo, he's gonna be playing with dude from the Crip side, but we all go to John Muir. These are all, I used to have to do all of that, like stuff you see in the movies. And they would give me the clearance, like, all right, man, as long as it's just basketball. And I'm like, yeah. Man, we won the city championship. We were good. I had our boys balling. And I turned that into the time. Those were the first group of boys. I'm like, all right, we got to do more than ball. So I had them wear shirt and ties. We were the only group wearing shirt and ties at games. We would sit down after school. After I taught them plays, we'd read the autobiography of Malcolm X. We had to learn other cultural things. It was like it started to evolve then. And that was the genesis of the Time Foundation. It grew into the Time Foundation, which became the nonprofit. But originally, it was just Boys to Men enrichment program. And it still is, because we still do it. But that was the genesis of that. I know that was a lot to say, so sorry.
You're good. Where did that idea come from? Just the fact of wearing that, just the suit and tie, like that's the professionalism, of society. But where did that idea come from? Just to have them doing this in kind of like almost like a uniform where they're kind of unity together as gentlemen. Like, where did that notion come from?
So two things. That's my upbringing. Very conservative black family, meaning when we went to church, everybody wore a suit. Today it's kind of like, come as you are. Yeah. We ain't grow up that way. Everyone had to wear a shirt and tie. And then growing up in Harlem, people don't realize, like, even with my hats and my style, I'm a Harlem dude. And not that everyone is this, and I don't always just say that, but I grew up seeing gentlemen and gentlewomen. And if you look at nostalgia pictures of Harlem, it was a very proud community in which dressing up was a big deal, not just to show off, but as a sense of pride. And so further, that experience in Milton Hershey, we had to wear shirt and ties to church and to formals. So for me, my whole life, dressing up in a shirt and tie or whatever was the uniform was normal to me. And it was a sign of respect. It was all those traditional things that we grew up hearing, like respect, uniformity, protocol. And so I'm like, I'm going to give these kids everything I had in my upbringing. And so y'all wearing shirt and ties, reluctantly they did it. I would have to get kids, because some of these kids, they were not even wearing, some of them never owned a suit. Some of them only equated suits with church.
Excuse me? Provide some of that for them?
Early on, I would get donations or just say, wear what you can. So you would have kids with like a Nike sweatpants and a button-down shirt and a tie, or like some Michael Jackson tube socks with the high waters. And so it was just at least make the effort, especially if you want to play. And then once I started my foundation, we had an assemblywoman, Jan Perry, out here. she got connections with the Fashion Institute, the fashion industry here in LA, and had them sponsor a bunch of brand new 3-piece black suits. This was like 3 years after, you know, as we started to become more established, people would give us. And so let me tell you what was dope about that.
Yeah.
Man, it makes me almost tear up thinking about it. I remember the day when I unveiled these brand new 3-piece suits to these kids, 45, 50 boys, because not only were the suits given us, the city was honoring us and our accomplishments. So we were invited to City Hall in front of the mayor and all the council people. So you can imagine me rolling up with our staff with 40 to 45 Black and Latino boys in City Hall, shirt and ties. You know, people thought we were like part of the Nation of Islam because that's the only point of reference. You see a bunch of inner city kids dress up. It's like, oh, well, y'all going to church? Or is this some kind of, it's like, no.
Yeah.
We go, we get this commendation from the city. And the kids got to, you know, speak. So anyway, I'm just, you got me reminiscing. I haven't thought about some of this stuff too.
I mean,
right now.
That's a memory those kids will never forget.
No,
that's incredible that you provided for them.
Yeah, God is good, man. And so I say that because I'm the conduit. I don't even like talking about this stuff because I feel like I'm truly a spiritual man. I wouldn't say religious because, you know, the connotation, but like my relationship with God, even people who saw it on the show, that's real. Like I pray, I meditate. Sometimes I argue with God. You know, I have a real relationship. And sometimes, you know, like with most relationships, when they're really intimate, you're protective of it. So I don't take it for granted. I feel like we're blessed to have the things we have. So why, you know, I think you and I share this, and it's my quote, you know, our rent, as Ali said, Muhammad Ali,
I love this quote,
is our service to others. You know, our rent here on earth is service to others. And I feel like when you're doing God's work, you don't talk about it. You just be about it. There's a lot of people that talk too much and they want you to know everything they're doing. And then you're like, I'm cool with people not knowing what I'm doing. And if they find out organically or if they know what we're doing, and we just do God's work in that very humble way without trying to be like, hey, look at what we're doing. And it has that much more meaning, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think so too, because that's a big difference between doing good for doing good and doing good for recognition, right? So you're doing good for the right reasons.
No doubt, no doubt.
Yeah. So Brandon just texted me. How much did you resonate with this experience with that movie, Coach Carter?
Yo, let me see if I can find this picture. All my former students are like, Mr. Rector, they bit your life. They was like, that was your story that no one knew. So yeah, Coach Carter is totally, I identified 100%. I literally was, even though I have a jokey side to me, and when you watch the movie, Sam Jackson's character didn't seem, you know, he had a sense of humor. I was very firm and stern and going to people's homes. And I had star basketball players that I had to bench because they were my students too. Some of them like, yo, dude, you got an F. You think I'm gonna let you in the game? And, you know, confronted by, you know, homies that are like, yo, what's good? I'm like, he's not playing. Like, what do you want me to do? Like, and so, yeah, man, yes, just till, yeah.
That's so awesome. So give me now kind of like a bird's eye view of what you do with TYME, like this kind of whole academy that you have now set up.
So, okay. Let me tell you, this is tough because in some instances, I'm still a one-man band. I have some help here and there. Like I've dedicated the last 20 years to this. I always felt some kind of way because I always felt like I'm torn because sometimes when I feel like I've deserved personal opportunities to make money and career and help my family, and then I go, you know what? It ain't for me, whatever it is. So even like with Survivor, I felt like they never gave me an opportunity to earn $1 million again. They never gave, and even the opportunities that were given to me outside of the show, they always interceded and cut that. Like even they were trying to make TV shows and I'm like, they didn't do that to anybody else. So I was always butthurt and seriously angry because I felt like I always wanted the trajectory of my success and to bring up my community with me, right? And to bring my family up with me. But then I realized my strength comes from God. You know, He gonna provide me with all the blessings I need. And so I say that because it's been a hard 20 years keeping this foundation up and running because it's nonprofit. So, you know, nonprofits are run, the mission statement, you really got to have people that believe, you know, when it's for profit, it's whatever it is that people need. You know, it's the supply and demand. You have something, I buy it, you make a profit. The nonprofit world is if I believe in that cause in a world that has a million causes.
Mm-hmm.
And so when you're, you know, when your whole thing is relying on the people's, the kindness of their heart, or $5 here, a couple of hundred here, a couple of shirt and ties here, a lot of it was coming out of my pocket. And a lot of it was coming out of my time. So I put a lot of my time in that sweat equity. Ironically, the name is time. So there's a play, double entendre. And so, but I am who I am. I'm loyal. When I start something, I don't quit. And a lot of those young boys are now young men and women that work for me now. The mission didn't stop. They're now in their 20s and 30s.
I was going to comment on that when I was looking at your, I guess the people that work underneath you, like almost all of them graduated from your program.
All of them, exclusive. Yeah. Like, so I said, wow, it's interesting that I'm able to get these, because let me tell you a quick story about that. I remember hanging out with an older family member. I'm not going to put them out there, but they would always be with younger women. And I don't mean teenagers. I mean, like, if they were in their 50s, the women were like in their 30s, and like, you know, like, yo, with this young women, I understand. He was like, well, look, if you can't find a woman, just raise one. You know, it was kind of like an off the cuff uncle, big cousin, big brother kind of comment. And you're like 10, you're like, huh? When I got older, I said, okay. Because sometimes older people are jaded and you can't change people. But with young people, if you have good intentions, you can mold them into some positive human beings. So when I first came out here, it was very difficult for me to find other men who were from here to believe in this cause. Like, it just seemed like if they weren't clout chasing or getting credit, or it was like this competition. It was a weird thing. So I said, you know what? If I can't find any men, I'm going to raise them. So I've raised them long enough to where they're now young men. And these are the young men that I've known since 10, 11, 12, 13. And because we have that trust, our bond is deeper than them working for, this is the mission statement. Each one teach one. Give back that which was given. And you can only sell that to people that have seen you in the trenches also believe in what you're saying. So now we're in high schools. We have another program called African American Academy, AAA. So we have Boys to Men Enrichment Program, mostly in middle schools. And in high school, we have the African American Academy, in which we cater to Black students who are marginalized or failing, or schools are not catering to their cultural needs. And we teach them how to play chess. They learn financial literacy. We go over Black issues. Lately, we've been talking about everything going on in our society, giving Black kids a safe space to talk about their issues. Very much like what I went to Rob with that first podcast. I said, look, I want a safe space where Black Survivor contestants can talk and not have to deal with, and I don't want to just say white, but whoever's non-Black, and bring their, because I always feel like when you're Black, you're on the defensive. We got to keep explaining why we feel the way we do or what discrimination. So I said, Rob, I want a safe space, no questions. Let everyone just be gadflies on the wall, and let us Black contestants talk about our experience. And then once we get to do that, then in my opinion, you can open up the door for discussion once you can freely and safely express yourself without being cut off or having to explain or be dealing with people's hostile comments. So I've always had that feeling, not just for Black, but anyone. My brown students, my Latino kids, a lot of them whose families were deported. I was teaching English, summer school English 2 years ago. And 3 of my students in the middle of class, families were deported. This is when Donald Trump, remember when 2 summers ago when the ICE raids went to like DEFCON 4, like they went to a whole nother level. Well, I definitely provided a space for a lot of my brown students to be able to have that sanctuary feeling that No one's going to make you feel uncomfortable if you need to leave class to be with your family, not stressing you on homework and different things, So to me, it's important, whatever the group is, to give them, even truth be told, with this recent Proud Boys thing, I'm all for, like, as hateful as they are, let them have their corner of the world where they express all the whatever they feel is their thing. Because then, to me, in my opinion, once they come out of that bubble, many of those bubbles will be popped just by default when they enter a society that they end up realizing, wait, some of these views are crazy. And that's the good thing, is that, yes, everyone deserves a space to express themselves, but know that when you juxtapose it with others, that's where learning truly happens. That's when you can't have good without bad, up without down, polarity. Someone talks, and if you're honest, you go, wow, I didn't think of it that way. Even though I'm sticking true to my guns. Okay, well, just know you're ignorant. And I'm not just saying this as a racial thing. I'm saying whether it's male, patriotic and patronizing ideas from a patriarchal point of view. That was a lot of P's. I think I meant to say patriarchal and said, I'm going to say a bunch of P's till I get to the word. It was patriarchal.
I think they call it mansplaining now.
Huh?
I think it's like mansplaining now, they call it.
Yeah, I'm mansplaining, trying to get to this word. But anyway.
So one of my favorite things that I saw when I was looking through the stuff at your school was celebrating Women's Day. Because one of your goals seems to be like just making these boys into gentlemen and treating women correctly. And that is kind of the basis of being a good person in society, right? And I think that was such a cool thing. And so speak a little bit more about kind of how you came to that approach. I mean, I'm assuming
every year we do a Women's Appreciation Day. We just picked a random day. I didn't want to do Mother's Day and let it and coincide with it. It's like, let Mother's Day be. So we would pick a random day in like April or May, just to highlight, just to say we don't need a special day. It could be any random day that we pick, and we want to highlight the women in our families. It was always, to me, there's always like an ode to my mom, to Abuelita and Mrs. Battles, right? All the women in my life, and my grandmother, Shirley Rector, may she rest in peace. I'm saying rest in peace. A lot of people in my life passed away. My grandmother just passed a few months ago. But anyway, honoring mothers. So Women's Day was the teachers, the female janitors, the women janitors, mothers, sisters, many of whom were the principal people supporting. Now here I am having a boys program, and most of the support was coming from the women. You either wouldn't see the fathers for several reasons. If they were locked up, some had passed away, some were separated, some chose not to. And it was interesting. Some of the fathers would feel threatened if there was another man or other men making headway with their sons. So it was like all these weird dynamics where we would only see mainly women. Shout out to the fathers that did show up, because there were definitely a handful of beautiful men that realized we're a team, we're a village. And so when we
sorry to cut, that's exactly what we try to promote, that it's okay to have these complex emotions, these complex feelings, and it's okay to talk about that. And that's exactly what you're kind of conveying right there.
And so, it's funny you say that, because I had this thing called the Million Man March meetings. I called it that. So they weren't so secret, but they was my little getaway with about 20 to 30 of my friends from different backgrounds. And we would meet at one of my friends who had a home that could accommodate. And it would just be dudes, husbands, fathers, dudes, just black men being able to sit down and talk about the ups and downs of trying to be a dad, or not, guys who are going through divorces. Those of us talking about things that happen to us racially and otherwise. And so, but the space was predominantly for us to just be men, and for us to talk, to cry, to laugh, to be unsure, to, because in most spaces when you're a man, all these things I just said are linked to weakness for some, not being sure. What do you mean you don't know? Why you're crying and all this other stuff. So for me, I would facilitate some of these meetings with a lot of my friends, older men, and I would invite some of the boys in the program. I would get permission from their parents, some of the guys who were like 14, some of the older ones who were 8, and let them see what a cohort of men look like. different backgrounds, talking about man stuff and letting them, and then getting their perspective, and then having the men go, remember we were that age? And then having my young guys go, yeah, and just kind of having that connection. So that's interesting you say that. But back to the women's appreciation, I would go down to downtown LA, have the flower mart. It's like you can buy wholesale flowers, cheap price. And we would get like maybe 5 dozen roses. And we would create this scroll that had an ode to women, this poem. I don't remember who wrote it. It was real beautiful. And all the boys would roll up the scrolls and put the rose in it. And on Women's Appreciation Day, they would sit down, the women or women they chose to highlight, and speak highly of them while giving them this rose. You can imagine how, not a dry eye in the place, but teaching the boys to honor those. And as I say this, it doesn't mean I excluded fathers that didn't want to do it for men, but I realized I always wanted to pay homage, not only to the women in my life, but highlight the people who are immediately the ones supporting their children and the boys in my program. And that was almost always majority women.
And that's such a special message to teach young, because they always say, you know, the way that you treat your future spouse is the way that you might have seen your father treat your mother, the way you treat your mother. And so to learn at that early age that maybe what you're witnessing at home, I'm not saying all the kids maybe had abuse or whatever at home, but if they did, you're teaching them that that's not the okay way to be, and that you're stopping this cycle that could have potentially gone on for generations. And I think that's incredible.
Yeah, and you know what? At the same time, so there's always two sides. I always advocate for boys and men because I feel like it just feels like being a man in society today is so hard. I don't know why, like, I don't know. It feels at times, I could be wrong, feelings, but sometimes it feels like a very anti-male space that you're in. And it could be with other men, it could be with other women, it could be just, and so what I always try to show and teach our boys is that you're not always going to be, it's not always going to be your fault. Like, yes, we're honoring women, but there's two sides of this coin. And being a man, I've never understood women and won't. And so to try to navigate those waters of understanding female sensibilities, because I went through it. I remember being a little boy, being sent to get sanitary napkins and looking at my mother like she's crazy. I'm like, what? I'm not going to get that, but having to go get these sanitary napkins for my mom, understanding what period and PMS meant at an early age, even though I was like, oh God. And then you get older and you're like, okay. And so my hope is that there are women out there doing the same for young ladies that I'm doing for young men, so that there's a balance out there of young women growing up knowing that men also have specific ways that we express and moods that we're in and things that may be frivolous and not, you know, important to you, but so, you know,
and
there's two sides of this.
I think that does exist a lot more naturally for women because they speak about more complex issues and more uncomfortable issues that they can pass down from mother to daughter, whereas father-son has a lot more of a strained relationship at times when it comes to kind of difficulties or emotions and that sort of thing. So
why do you think?
I think it's just the generation that was before us. Like, I don't know. Like, my dad only recently, like, I have a relationship with him. He just had moved away when I was 2. So it's just very recently he started opening up a lot more because my stepmom left him and, you know, all of his drinking and that sort of stuff. So I don't know if this was something ingrained in them as a kid when times were tough, you just pick yourself up your bootstraps and just keep going, or I don't know what it was ingrained in, you know, back then, but, you know, that's not the right way to be. And I think that's what hopefully, you know, our kids' generation is going to be the total norm, right? To just kind of be yourself. It's okay to have these emotions, it's okay to talk about them. And that's my hope, at least for this next generation.
I have hope. It's tough because whatever we're teaching our children, they're also getting mixed messages from mass media and social media. Yep. And so, you know, as you try to teach, I don't even like that word politically correctness. I just like decency, common sense. Like, we all grew up, even things that we said, because that's what we said, the N word, the F word, whatever other word we weren't, well, you know, whatever it was at that time. But, you know, there's a saying, when you know better, you do better. And so, you know, I think the reason I'm thinking that, because I have kids in my program who are battling identity crisis in terms of their sexuality.
Mm-hmm.
Like, at the end of the day, I don't care if you gay, straight, bi, you're still a male until you choose to call yourself something else or whatever your choice is. But as a young man, that's not the only thing you're going to be going through. You're also going to be going through fatherlessness issues and regular stuff that everyone goes through. And I say that because oftentimes I would hear kids, you know, especially boys, oh, that's gay. Oh, you get, like, they would use the term just, and I'm like, whoa, hold on. What do you? No. We're not doing that.
That was the common phrase for something that was terrible. Like that.
Right.
That's gay. I don't do that. Yeah.
But we know better. We know that, yeah, I mean, so our job is to go, I get colloquially what you're trying to say. Just don't say that. That's not cool. You know, and navigate those waters in which we hold our boys responsible, but not in a way where they're condemned to hell. You know, I think especially black boys, and I remember growing up feeling this way, and being in education, it still exists. It seems like whenever black boys do something, it's seriously criminalized to behavior and almost like an innate thing that is part of our culture. And then when white boys do it, it's just, you know, boys doing what boys do, or you know how it is, how it's like this weird, interesting description.
Well, I mean, look
when
at
I'm with some of my white colleagues and they describe certain behaviors.
Look at the 17-year-old kid who shot those protesters. Can you imagine?
Right.
The other way around on race?
Well, we already know. We knew. I mean, we have many examples from Dylan Roof going into that church, killing 9 people. I mean, they're all around us. We clearly see that there is a difference between how white males are coddled. Even to the fact with this recent, you know, we kind of text each other about the Proud Boys. It's like the fact that this group has not been put on the terrorist watch group and the KKK, and yet groups like the Black Panther Party not only were destroyed and in people's lives, and the Black Panther Party was created to be self-sufficient, to self-police, to feed breakfast to our children, to make sure our kids, like, it wasn't about, we're going to go out and destroy white people. And the government said, and this is J. Edgar Hoover, who destroyed many lives, said, this group is the single-handed group that we need to worry about. There's no greater threat than this group. And then here you got these clear white supremacist groups that have been around historically from forever. And you see the handling of it, but see that mentality seeps its way even in educational spaces. It's kind of like this, you know, forgiving spirit when it's young white males, whatever it is. And when it's young black males, it's treat them like adults. They know what they're doing. How, you know, it just becomes this polarized thing that I don't like.
Yeah, I don't like double standard and all that stuff too. Yeah, heavy stuff. So I want to, I'm going to bring in Brendan here in a sec, because we're going to get a little bit of Survivor, but then I really want to focus on all the stuff you've done that we kind of alluded to post Survivor in the last like 6 months or so.
I'm here for, while we're here real quick, I found a picture of some of my, early.
That's like the first team?
Yes.
That's incredible. Undefeated. Any of those kids go on to play college ball?
Huh?
Any of those kids go on to play college ball?
A few of them, many of them just went on to work and take care of their families. A couple of them were able to get into college, you know, but after that, I'm not sure.
So one of the most interesting things that I never heard, I guess, labeled, right? And until I think it was your podcast you did like a year ago with Rob and Keyword, was code switching. I'd never heard there was, you know, eubonics, whatever, slang, you know, that's the term people pass around. But code switching, I thought was a really interesting premise. And I think it was a huge part of the game between you and V that ultimately let V kind of win the whole thing, is that that was 100% her game, was this code switching. And I thought that was incredible. So if you tell me a little bit more about code switching and how that kind of affects your life,
So
how
it
that
works.
Survivor, and I thought that was so
Nah, it works in our favor. So this is why I always try to tell kids, I'm like, I think so when I say white and black, your listeners are just gonna have to, the ones who are sensitive gonna have to get over it, because I almost feel like when you say white people, that's like the N-word, or if you start out with describing anything black, it's like, oh, he's all militant. People gonna have to get over that. It's just the description we're going in. But I always feel like, and I remember I experienced, I went to a predominantly white boarding school. I just had to navigate spaces, and plus I had to see family members. Code switching worked in our favor. And during slavery, this is what we had to do. We had to scratch when it didn't itch, laugh when it wasn't funny, because it was all about making white people comfortable. And whatever made them comfortable, that's what we had to do. But it didn't mean that's who we truly were. So they never really got to know who we were, because it was all about subservience and service. As long as you're serving us, we care less how you feel. The minute we see you're unhappy, then we're going to take notice. Does that mean we have to sell you because you're no longer happy? You know, as part of us surviving, we have a history of code switching, because showing the white masters, you know, anything other than happy, smiling, I'm good, could get you sold, could get you whipped, could get you, you know, extra scrutiny. Reason I'm always giving things in a historical context. So for people like, why is he always talking about slavery? Because it's relevant, all right? So let me fast forward. Whenever you're in white spaces, code switching is how black people survive. Meaning the average black person in a predominantly white space has so much of who they are hidden, because you show up in a white space and everyone's preconceived notion of you is at the tip of their tongues. Hey, dude, do that rap song. Hey, do you play basketball? Hey, yo, I listen to Snoop's new album. Or, you know, if you're the black woman and you're at work, and people are thinking you should know how to twerk, or, you know, it's all kinds of stuff that go with it. So, and I'm not saying black people are the only ones. I think a lot of non-white, whether they're Latinos, Indians, when you're in predominantly white spaces, you have to code switch. In other words, what that means is I have to learn to be a social chameleon. It doesn't mean I'm not being myself, but in this moment, if I was completely myself, that could put me at a disadvantage in how you see me. So I must play in the moment what will be convenient for you in order for me to exist. And then when I'm no longer in this space, I'll be who I am until the next place I have to be, where I may have to. So how that, I think, manifested in Survivor was, there were moments where I knew I had to be quiet. And there were other moments where I knew I was going to be outspoken.
Wait,
there were moments where, I mean, I'm naturally.
Tell me a moment where you actually were quiet.
They didn't show it. I know. Man, a lot of times, you know, when it was easier to be quiet, when Boston Rob and I were paired up. Like early, if you look at some of the earlier seasons, earlier episodes, they showed him doing a lot more commentary on people. Because I learned, once I started learning what this game was about, I was like, I'm going to let him lead and be the alpha guy, that, because I realized this is a game about perception. Perception precedes reality. If I'm perceived as the leader, then they're going to target me. So, and it's not that we worked off each other. Like he didn't lead me, I didn't lead him. It was just, he had Sarah, I had Visepia. We realized we can come together and have a majority in our earlier group. So a lot of times I would let him do the talking until I felt otherwise. And there were many moments where I would just talk to V. I would be like, yo, this is crazy. Yo, do you believe? You know, sometimes the camera captured us and showed the world. Other times it was just her and I. And then to the game, to show how we both were playing, not even based on race, Visepia definitely broke rank and went her own way a couple of times. And I wasn't mad at her. That's why I was like, I didn't understand why Kathy and those who didn't see, like, only thing y'all, we keep presenting race because y'all presenting race. But truth be told, if Kathy would have chose Visepia and Kathy would have been the winner of Survivor Marquesas, period. I did not understand how she could not see that Pascal and Nalia made it very clear they were never voting for each other. So I'm like, race or not, if you go, this group is like, yo, talk to me. What we got to do? And this other group is like, well, you can come with us, but we're not voting. So I say that because Visepia and I definitely had the code switch and play in different games at different times.
It won her the game because she goes into this merge and she's down in the numbers greatly, and she just kind of snuck along, making her notes in her book, and
Genius.
they're so genius. And they took that
Genius.
they took that away. You notice that after that season, the ability to have that notebook.
Think about that. So our season, what I'm realizing, was a lot of firsts. Some I'm aware of, some fans and people like yourself will tell us. They took away the ability because they were like, oh, she had an unfair advantage. No, there were no rules. Y'all said bring one luxury item,
Yeah,
and that was hers.
So
So why?
for the fans that haven't watched it, one of the very I guess common end of game challenges was knowing everything about the other survivors on that season. And so what she did, you were allowed a luxury item at the beginning of the game to bring with you, and she brought a notebook and a pen. And everyone thought she was just doing diary entries, but she was literally writing everything she learned about everyone and studying it, and it won her that competition, which allowed her to remain in the game because she was going to be voted out.
Genius. I didn't even know, because I never, I thought she was just writing in her diary. But that's just one of the many things why I love my sister V, because people often forget too, she's a military MP. So despite the Christian narrative and the whatever they thought of her, this was a woman that was a military police officer, and anyone in the military knows that's not an easy job. So anyway, I can go on about V.
Oh yeah, she's wonderful. One of the questions I wanted to ask you, Survivor related, because I heard you mention it, you liked, obviously Earl's awesome, you liked his season because of the diversity of it. And I know you never really watched consistently afterwards. They did you wrong. We'll get into that. But the season before that was a great season, but kind of a clusterfuck, because they started each tribe racially, right? There was the black tribe, the white tribe, the Asian tribe, the Hispanic tribe. And so they had the same breakdown from Earl's season, the next season, but started out with this racially divided tribes. Did you watch that one?
No, who won that season?
Yule.
Oh, I heard about that one.
Yeah.
Because when Earl and I talked, and different people we spoke, we said the 2 seasons that they did it and a non-white person won, they're like, we ain't doing this no more.
Yeah, and
this diversity thing ain't what we thought it was.
And really, it's only recently in the last few seasons that they've really put a lot more emphasis on diversity and having more as well, kind of homosexual. They've had actually finally a transgender. So yeah, it's interesting that they did this in 13 and 14 and then had a huge gap of not really going that direction. But yeah, so what is your thoughts on starting a season that way?
I don't like it, and I'll tell you why.
Yeah.
When I say diversity, that's not me and my black gang versus your brown gang and your gay gang.
That's exactly the reception we got.
Yeah, I'm like, really? I mean, that's what society is. We're all coming with our. I think Earl mentioned it on our first podcast, and I'm gonna reiterate a version of it, is that Survivor has the ability to create the utopia that society can be. It has the ability to cast in a way to show America what it can be. So why not have a casting where you cast and someone just happens to be gay? Obviously, black is the one thing we can't hide. So you can't happen to be the black guy. When you walk in, it's the first thing people see. But what I'm saying is, don't put us all on one tribe, because guess what? We don't all like and get along. You sprinkle some of us throughout on different tribes, and sprinkle a little brown folk and someone Indian and Polynesian and some white brothers and sisters, and you just make it. And truly, if some will come together, because you'll realize, we have a saying, everyone who's your skin folk ain't necessarily skin folk, right?
I love that quote. I was actually about to say it. Say it again.
Yeah. So it's a real thing in that.
Yeah, say it again though. I kind of talked over you.
Everyone who's your skin folk ain't necessarily your kin folk.
Yeah, I love
Meaning, just because we have the same skin color doesn't mean we family. And that's true for any group of people, but specifically for black people that have a history of people completely going against the good of the whole, or maybe in their mind, this is how they feel, and that's fine. But I think Survivor would, but I don't know. Jeff and them, they know what they're doing. I think this is, we had these private meetings with CBS recently. We had these kind of heart-to-heart meetings of change. I ain't gonna get into detail of what it was.
Was this in response to the panel podcast you were doing? Because that's
yeah. I mean, but even more so, we sent a letter, the Black Survivor Alliance, to CBS on Juneteenth, and had them. We gave them a time to respond. It was sent to Jeff and Kelly Kahn and whoever, all the CBS execs. And they responded, and we set up a series of meetings in which Black Survivors Alliance. There was another group of Black survivors called Soul Survivors. There was some individual people. It's like, that's why I said it truly showed that Black people don't always get along, but we always have the same goal. And so we all had our opportunity to meet privately with CBS and air our grievances. But I'm only speaking for me. In that meeting, I really had a lot to say to Jeff in that first meeting, because I felt like for 20 years, Vesepia and I were very quiet. We were off the radar. We chose to keep, and we would always have to hear from different things. And I would just watch, and it was whack because Jeff was cool to me in the beginning. Like when we first got to know Jeff on our season, Rob and I used to kid with him and Mark Burnett all the time. And I saw him after. It was this cool vibe. And then through the years, I started seeing a different Jeff. I started to see, like, it almost felt like Survivor started to become about Jeff and not the contestants. And I was like, I really didn't care because I'm like, that's their little thing. But it just made me look at him. He started to seem a little arrogant and, you know, whatever. And I don't want to talk bad about Jeff because I know he got his fans and this ain't about that. But I'm just saying my personal feelings to me were also tied into the fact that I felt like Jeff knew I deserved another chance to come back and not be left with just that one experience. I'm not saying that because whatever fans think of me or just me going, hey, you know, but because they called me. I never solicited. They had me pack my bags for Survivor All-Star, had me get, my son was just born. My son was born the month before. I made all these reservations and no one emailed, called. Like that still burned a hole in me. And I'm like, dude, that was you and Mark. You couldn't even call me? So to hell with you.
So just as a backstory, so season 8, so Sean was on season 4, season 8 was All-Stars, and it was the first time they had return contestants on, and he had gotten a call that was like, hey, we're interested, we want you to come, and he's like, all right, let me get all these arrangements in, and they said, great, you're going to be one of the, I think it was 8 men that returned, and then literally just ghosted you. Never said you're not coming, you were ready to go, and then
still to this day, by the way, I was waiting for Jeff to go, you know, whatever. But what was sad about that, they didn't put no brothers on.
I know.
Again,
but
Jervis.
Yeah, between you and Jervis, it had to be one of you two if they were going to do it.
And even Ted. Like, I felt like Ted, he went further. Like, he and I at that time, for Black men, went the furthest any Black man would go in any reality show.
Ted was, they already gave him kind of that weird edit. So I think you were probably the natural choice there.
Yeah, I mean, again, I'm just saying that because I know it's still people's choice. And I felt like, okay, I mean, because they told me, I said, well, since they didn't pick me, Jervis had to be. He was the first brother, you know. So when they didn't pick any, I was like, really? Y'all going to have an all-star and don't have any brothers? Clarence? You know, whether Clarence dealt with the Beans or whatever, it's just like fair representation. Yeah. Y'all had people on there, you know, and again, it's your choice. I'm not even one of those people that rank people. I'm just saying representation matters. And it's like, dang, you know, y'all had Alicia. That's cool. That's it.
She wasn't really a Survivor contestant. She's just tough. I think Brandon had a question here for you.
All right.
You there?
Yeah, definitely. It's been so enlightening to listen to you guys have this conversation so far. So thank you, Sean, so much for donating some time and just enlightening us, really. I think it's super important what you're doing.
No doubt.
I did find one thing particularly interesting on Marquesas. So, I don't know, maybe it's about like a 45-second, a minute clip of you and V talking on the beach when everyone else was swimming. Mm-hmm. And there's a couple segments about discussing how different it is just being a Black, whether it's male or female, just being Black on Survivor. And you and V were just discussing that, and I wanted to get more insight because there's a lot of things that cameras don't show us, right? So you already touched on this a little bit, but one thing I found particularly interesting is that you were discussing how, you're playing the game within the game because you're African American. Like, you have to play a different game. So what would you play differently? I know you mentioned like the code switching and everything, but is there anything else that you found particularly different that you had to do in order to keep moving forward within the game?
It's a great question, and wish I could see your face, man. You look like Charlie from
Yeah,
Charlie's
sorry.
Angels.
I'm
You get a phone call from Charlie and just get the thing. But anyway, that's a good question. No, it's cool. It's love. I was just trying to listen intently. So, yeah, that moment was a very real moment. I meant that. But first of all, and I want to say this, I think Vesepia and I, along with Boston Rob, are the first contestants to play with all the contestants on our season. So I say that because whether you hear me talk about race and my struggle, my cast is an awesome cast. We're all close, we cool. When we do get to talk, it's all love. I don't hold anything personal to anybody, like from top to bottom. The only one, and I said this in the interview, that I may have, and I'm one of those people that I forgive. I don't forget, was when Patricia gave me that Confederate flag. I still don't know why. But outside of that.
Whoa. What?
Yeah, I'll tell you right after this. But I say that because while we were playing, I didn't know these people. All I knew was my collective experience as a black man in America. Is that we have to code switch, that we have to play. Every black person in corporate America or at a job where you're the only knows exactly that feeling. So I spoke to it because I felt like this sister knows what it's like, that we're playing two games, because we have to play the game of Survivor where we're hungry, the game of truly surviving. You're like, I'm thirsty, these bugs are eating us, how we need fire, like just the game of Survivor to survive. And then we're playing this other game, this social game. And so I always go, if it's not that important, then let's reverse it. Let's put 14 black people and 2 white people. And guess what? All you would talk about is the inequality and the inequity and how these 2 white people overcame this predominantly black cast. Like, I always tell white people, just reverse everything. I always say, you think you're tired of us talking about it? Try waking up and living this. It is difficult, but we deal with it. And so that's why I think, it matters. I think when you can talk openly about race, listen, the history of racism predominantly is perpetuated by white people. Like, it's not the history of black people doing stuff to white people, the history of Jim Crow and towns being burnt down and people being lynched. Like, when you look at the atrocities of this country, it's pretty one-sided. So I think when it comes to talk about race, those of us who experience it are in a better seat to talk about the experience than those who are not. And so what you heard on that beach was me speaking on the collective experience of black people in general.
Yeah, I mean, it's tough. I live in Charleston, right, which doesn't have the best history in terms of racism or anything. Fortunately, they have done a lot of work in trying to be more progressive and introducing the Museum of Slavery and trying to educate people what their past is and what is so horrific about it. So
right.
I think Marquesas is a really great example of shining light on African American history, or just any minority really, and just seeing the plights that they had to go through.
I thank you for your comment, Brendan, because I didn't know at that time we'd be making history, 1, with Vesepia, and 2, looking back 20 years when I started talking about race, that 20 years later, we're still talking about the same thing. It's just, and I often wonder, was that why they didn't bring me back either? Because they know I keep it all the way a buck. Like, you put me, wherever you put me, I'm going to keep it real. And I always thought, for me, and this ain't disparaging anyone, I just felt like maybe I was too real, or maybe, the fact that lightning struck in a bottle and with someone like myself and Vesepia can make it and finish to the end. And shout out to like the general and John, because those votes allowed her to win. She won 4-3. And these were people that changed and allowed for her to win because they felt like, based on the merit of her speech and Nalia's speech, that she deserved it. And, shout out to them.
Yeah, I do find it funny, speaking of John, that you speaking on race was potentially a detriment for you coming back. We don't know that, but potentially. But Rob outing a man on television
Crazy.
was not.
We talked about that too. I think because Boston and Rob and I are close. We talk all the time, and I don't know how recent we talk, but he was like, "Yo, dude, some of that stuff I said, I know, but you know what's crazy? I said good things that we grow and learn. Things sometimes I think he was trying to be funny and facetious, but outing a man on, you can tell that affected John's game because I don't think John wanted to be outed just yet. I think he was in the lead. He led the road to 4. And I think, that's each person's decision. John and I bonded, on and off. Like, I don't want to be one of those people that's like, I got gay friends, because I do. I love to death, that I go to bat, will put my life on the line. But I don't use the adjective of their sexuality to describe. They just my peoples. But I do understand that in itself is a struggle. So that's what I'm saying. Being a black man, we can't discriminate because we at the bottom. We know what it's like. So it's funny, usually people who are disenfranchised in their own culture come to black people. We be like, come on and join us. We know what it's like. Come on, get yourself a plate. Tell us how life is hard coming out in your family. Or, you bring a black man home and it's not guess who's coming home to dinner. It's guess who ain't leaving. So, I think we definitely made history. I think John doesn't get enough credit. I think as a gay man, he represented the hell out of playing Survivor at a time when you look at just how Survivor, I think you mentioned it, Brandon, beginning, it was always like the Kobe's and and I don't like shitting on them, like Hunter. Even on our season, everyone was mad because he had this image of the Anglo-white male. And I'm like, no, just to Hunter, because, Hunter, shout out to him, and we were cool and everything. But it was like the show was set up to have a specific type. And if you didn't fit that character type, then Survivor quickly forgot about you, or the fans were like, And so I feel like when it comes to John, I know they've had subsequent gay contestants, but I feel like he probably doesn't get enough credit. I think he could have easily been brought back.
Yeah, he could have. Because really, the only thing that brought him down was his own hubris. He was doing a really good job. And then he got cocky, and that's always the downfall on the show.
Sitting in a tree, oiled up, talking about they're wishing me well. I don't remember his speech, but I just remember watching it.
About how he's got 5 and 6 in Nalia and Pappy, how they just want him to do well or something.
What's wild is the general just had an interview with Rob, and he gave me a shout out, which was dope, because I'm like, I don't ever ask for credit. I don't even like talking about it, because I'm like, it was all a crapshoot. There was no rhyme or reason. You just kind of go on instinct. But definitely when it came to turning that thing around, I had a lot to do with that. And not because I was this huge mastermind, because I was desperate. And I was like, my natural instinct, I tell you, my upbringing is I fight, man. I'm like, I don't care what you think. And I remember having those talks with Pappy, this Southern white judge. This is before we won that challenge together. This is me knowing that this old white dude from Georgia with these conservative views and whatever was said to him, I sat down with him, man to man, late when everyone was sleeping. And I was like, dude, we just had a candid talk. I ain't gonna say I swayed his life, but I was really working everyone to see, like, yo, there's still $1 million. Like, y'all acting like this is some real, like, y'all gonna go home and be cool with these people. Like, whatever you thought about me, you did not come out here to get 7th place. At least position yourself. And I went to Kathy and Leah and so I'm glad those who play the game and can acknowledge, because that's the part I feel like Jeff and them, they didn't really make me seem like I was a player. It was just like I was a character that had funny sound bites. But it's like, yo, dude, I played the game. That's why I felt like them calling me back was due in part because they sort of, they knew that if you put me out there, whether I come in first or last, I'm going to play this social game. Now, when it comes to swimming and getting hungry and all of that, well, I started taking swimming lessons and getting a little bit better, but I never had the chance to show the world how my swim game increased.
Yeah, that's great. So I wanted, because we're getting low on time here, I wanted to kind of jump over to what you've been doing recently. You've been hosting these panel podcasts or co-hosting. I thought that first one was beautiful, that, you know, Rob introduced everybody and then just kind of steps back and you kind of led everything and kind of not necessarily aired dirty laundry, because I don't know if some of the stuff that Survivor does is on purpose, but definitely aired kind of the inadequacies of it. And it's something that's been continuing on. And why I love it is because this is a microcosm of kind of society, right? That's what reality TV show is. And if we're leading these kind of conversations on this kind of subject that we all really care about, that's something that's going to translate to how we view society and continue to lead those conversations. And that's like the most important thing that we could be doing right now.
No doubt. So yeah, the first podcast, because we were in our like separate black camps trying to figure out these private meetings with CBS. And I didn't even check in with anybody. I just on my own call, because I've been wanting to do this since I did a thing with BET, an online thing when season 5 came on, and I had to do every episode recap. And I remember telling the executives at BET, I'm like, why don't we do a roundtable with black? It wasn't just about, I said black reality people. So this is when like the Road Rules and Real World, and this is like when some of those early reality shows were more social. It wasn't kind of like the stuff that, you know, it's like everything is out now, and they balked on it. But I always thought we have a unique perspective because we're not really celebrities, but we're being celebritized, meaning reality people now can capitalize and they're doing commercials and but back then reality people were just famous people without the money. Like people knew who you were, but you went back to your regular apartment afterward, and it wasn't. So I thought the stories we brought were interesting. And so fast forward, because I knew I had done that interview with Rob and he had a platform. I'm like, dude, I got this idea. He was like, whatever, man, I got you. Let's do it. I was like, yo, let's do a round table with everyone, because there was a group of black people that were doing, but it was a smaller group with specific. And I was like, nah, let's reach out, because I didn't know. I said, look, let's reach out to whoever's willing to come on. And that was what you saw that first one. And a lot of that stuff was, well, first of all, it wasn't scripted, but a lot of that was me hearing for the first time. But what was good is that we realized we weren't bugging. Like the experiences that we experienced were a through line. Now, here's the thing. Not that everyone experienced direct racism with people calling you the N-word, but what I'm saying is whether you experience some sort of prejudice before, after, or during, those issues were buried and you had to just kind of move on with your life. So for me, I didn't feel anyone on my, let's say during the show, called me the N-word or blatantly racist and all this other stuff, but I felt the treatment I got afterward made me question why me. Now, that's why I said for me, but others had stories of, violence and N-words being thrown,
Yeah, I remember I can't remember which lady it was, but she said, she got like cornered at a pool table and they were calling
Jolanda. That was Jolanda. I know that specifically. Jolanda said 2 guys, she had to pick up a pool stick and defend herself, and they were like coming at this black woman. And I'm like, how'd this happen on y'all watch? And how, but it made me think of also that white male privilege, because as we saw in season 39, the gentleman that was, fondling these women, whatever was going on. Obviously now the full story, and I don't like slandering anybody, was alleged. But from what we saw, it just, you said, imagine, like when we talked about this guy in Wyoming with these guns. Yeah, black people always go, imagine if that was a black guy with the first allegation of sexual, inappropriate touching, not only would have been kicked off, he'd have left in handcuffs, whether they were made out of coconuts or whatever was on that island, he would have left in with handcuffs. So you just see the handling of how white males in our society and even in Survivor. And I juxtapose it, and I don't like bringing up old stuff, but like you said, in season 5, how they edited my boy Ted and stuff. And so we always have this thing where we're like, just be fair, man. Like sometimes these things are implicit bias. That's why, some of it is you don't know, some of it is willful ignorance. Some of it is you don't want to know because it would mess up your whole world and everything that you thought. So,
and I think that's the hardest thing to convey to people when I have these sort of conversations with, other white friends. It's not that you're outwardly a racist person. You just have these, like you said, implicit biases that kind of sway the way you kind of look and think about things that you don't really know that you're affecting other people by thinking or talking this way.
And what's interesting about that? This is what I always tell a lot of my friends who are white. So I go, like, me calling you a name has no weight. I ain't call you honky, cracker, white boy, blah, blah. It might hurt your feelings. There's no power behind that. Your feelings are hurt. Yeah. You calling me the N-word or something, you have a systemic mechanism behind you that backs how you feel. Yeah, we clearly saw from the debates the other day, and he ain't the first one. But what I'm saying is, there's systemic racism in our penal system, in our educational system, in the legal system. And so if you're the average white person and don't realize that, you're implicit by, we saw in Central Park, right? That was what a clear case of what we're talking about. If there were no cameras running, where a white woman feels like, I know if I call the police, they don't need any, all they know is a white woman in distress. That will stop hell and high water to make sure that you are safe, as long as you mention there's a black man. That's the system. So when you're black, you almost got to go overboard. If there's something going, you have to prove, you have to have evidence, you have to have cameras. I remember being in college, you know, being one of the few blacks, go to Albany in these classes, Psych 101, whatever. And it always felt like the white kids were like, oh, affirmative action. Why we gotta do it? And it's like 5 black kids in a classroom with 500. I'm like, would y'all be happy if none of us were here? Damn, do you think we all stupid? Yeah. Really? So I just feel like my thing is, let's have an honest discussion on this, or else don't. Just keep your hate and keep it, but don't try to act like you want to have a good discussion and you filibustering conversations. You just yelling at people. You're doing talking points from something you heard. You're really uneducated and don't know nothing. And it boils down to, you know, I'm white and I say so and you prove it wrong. Like, if you're that guy, but if you're the, you know, I feel your energy, Brandon. If you're the guy that's like, you know what, we probably do have some implicit bias. Mm-hmm. Maybe if we check it, we can make these situations a little more better. You know where it happens naturally? In sports. It's one of the only places you see people check their, I don't care what biases, even when you look at homophobia with Michael Sams coming out of college football, like, I'm sure the person he tackled had no problems thinking this guy was gay or straight. It was like, this is a hell of a linebacker coming off this line. So I think sports is one of the great equalizers where, if we're in the trenches, I don't care what you are, but outside of sports, it seems really hard for Americans to be like, yo, are we going to have this discussion, or are we just going to keep this yelling at each other and keep having these discussions about one-sided fairness?
Yeah, and this is something that I struggled with on, like, social media. I actually had to, like, quit social media altogether. Like, once everything finally boiled over, right, after the George Floyd stuff and all the protests started, you know, you have all these people that are like, oh, you know, all lives matter. Oh, these protests are ruining my day, blah, blah, blah. All I would say to these people is, like, this is our time to just kind of shut up, right? Like, learn and listen. Like, you don't have to have an opinion on everything. You don't have to feel like you know everything. Like, sometimes it's better just to shut up and try to take in a different, you know, vantage point. And, like, people are just incapable of doing that nowadays, because I think that's what social media has done. It's made this kind of echo chamber of confirmation bias that has, oh, well, all these people think that I'm right too. So, like, it just sucks, you know?
It does. Well, you know what I like about this social media?
Oh, sorry, go on.
Not the place to have this discourse. If you can invite people to have a civil discourse like we're doing, listen, I'm listening to you. Then those who really want to learn will tune in to spaces where they can see the other side, and then when they're by themselves, take it in. I tell my friends all the time, I listen to Fox News, just like I listen to CNN, NMS. I want both sides. And then I'm going to come to my own truth. Not everybody on Fox is a racist. Not everybody in CNN is a bleeding liberal. There's a happy median. Listen to both if you really want to get to the truth.
Brendan, you had a question?
Yeah, Sean, like, both you and Brendan have had a great discussion so far. I'm not sure if you've ever heard of Joyner Lucas. He's a rapper out of Boston, but he has this really powerful video called "I'm Not Racist," and the whole point of it is, for the first half of the song, he raps as a white person talking down to a black person, and then the second half of the video, basically the black person gets to respond. And one of the lines that really hit me hard, it's kind of something you've discussed pretty in depth, is talking about the N-word. It's like, when we use it, we know that's just how we greet each other. When you use it, you know there's a double meaning under. And even if I wasn't picking cotton physically, that doesn't mean I'm not affected by the history. And I think, you know, if you have 5 or 6 minutes to watch that video, I think it really gets to the point and the heart of this conversation that we've been having.
That's a good point. I'll check them out afterwards. You know, Black people, we have our own colloquial term. Here's the thing. Because our language was taken from us, everyone is always in our business. So that's why sometimes what you said, Brandon, I wish people, because the only language we have in this country is English. And even if people want to say, oh, that's Ebonics and broken English, do you understand what we're saying? When it's our songs and you rap into our lyrics, you know it. So my point is, when other cultures have their own politically incorrect terms, or we don't know, because if you don't speak Arabic or Spanish, or, you know, have some dialect of Scottish in your family, then that's whatever. But because Black people are unique to these American soil, because our whole history since the first American Revolution, the first person to catch a bullet was a Black man, Crispus Attucks. We've bought into this patriotic idea of America. And so to the point where we don't even have a second language. So when we speak, what people would look down as Ebonics and Black English is our version of colloquializing language so that we can have a safe space to say what we want to. So sometimes that's why the N-word or whatever we say is looked at through the lens of white people. Everything we say and do is always like, oh, that ain't proper English. Why are you using the N-word? Or why is she a B? And why you say picking cotton? It's like, yo, dude, sit back, fall back. If you really want to learn, just listen the way you do with these rap songs. Because it's interesting, most of the people that buy rap are white kids, white people. Like in terms of buying rap, like when you look at who are the people buying it, and you know, I remember this one white dude, he was like, yo, he knew the whole Wu-Tang catalog. And I don't know, I was like, yo, God bless you. I love the Wu, no doubt. But I don't need to study every rapper. I live it, I understand it. And so I'm like, if you're willing to listen to the Wu, then you should be a lot closer in understanding who I am and what I am, so that when you're in your own circles with white folks, you can express to them what I'm trying to say. Because sometimes just they're not going to get it when it's coming from me, because it's still going to be, oh, that's just some Black stuff. But that's why I always tell all the cool white people, you know, when you put your arm around your Black friend, don't ask, hey, how are you? Ask them, how am I doing? Like some version of not, yo, you good? But just like, Am I an ally? Am I being a good enough friend? Have I failed you in any way? And that doesn't mean crawling or begging or sucking up to. I'm talking about, because there are pockets in America, and I know I just gave you my Milton Hershey story, truly where Black and white and brown get along. Like every place in America ain't this polar place where people are ready to kill each other through racial. There are spaces in America where there are white people that are mad cool with Black people, and they just, because we grew up together. Because we kicking it. And there are spaces where Latinos and Blacks and whoever, and whatever that experience is, isn't the norm in spaces where they're majority white. And so that's the thing that we have to tackle, because there's a history in this country with that.
Yeah, definitely. And I think to your point, there's a huge difference, which some people don't understand, between embracing a minority culture and abusing it.
And appropriation too. We can throw that word in there. It's a whole lot of that going on, where it's like, I embrace it, I'm appropriate, I'm gonna make money. And, you know, and so those are all the conversations that we have too, culturally, where do we have allies or do we have appropriators? You know, we have people that enjoy Black culture, they just don't want to be Black. So it's like, if I can be on the fringes and talk how you talk and play ball and listen to your music, and the aesthetics of Black has always been sexy, and that's throughout the history. My mom and them said Elvis used to come to the Apollo. This is real account. This ain't what she read. They, you know, I lived in Harlem, so the Apollo is down the street from my house. And she said the Colonel and Elvis, and for those who don't know, the Colonel was like his manager. He was always with Elvis. She said he used to come to the Apollo and study all these acts, all Black, who were not allowed on the Ed Sullivan. And then next time you saw Elvis on the Ed Sullivan, he was doing all the acts that these Black, not just shaking his hips, but the everything, you know, his whole act. And I say that because it's back to the thing. Black people are like, man, America only love us when they can use us. You know, we're only American, I say, when it's time to fight wars for this country and when it's time to entertain. If you ain't wearing a uniform to fight or got a flag on your back representing, America don't really want to hear from you. And so
The whole
for
shut up.
those who call themselves allies, it would be great for you to extend that allyship to be ambassadors, not just for Black people and Black culture, but in this time, Black people have the longest running history of antagonism in this country. People don't know that the original Statue of Liberty was a Black woman. It wasn't meant for immigrants. It was an ode to Black people. And the original statue, Bartholdi, was the sculptor, and La Boule, he was actually part of the French commission who wanted to pay homage to Black people who fought in the Civil War. So they had this statue. It was a Black woman holding a lantern with broken chains. And they were like, oh, hold on now. Is that what we really gonna welcome into America? And they realized white people would be mad. And they came up with this Roman goddess, the one we see now, and they changed. But you know, they were slick. They found a way to keep the chains, because if you look at the Statue of Liberty from the top, this chain, the broken chains are still on her ankles. Why do I bring that story up amongst just from a historical perspective, to let people know America has not reconciled with its Black brothers and sisters. And so when you look at a movement like Black Lives Matter, I just did a lesson the other day. Black Lives Matter ain't nothing new. They just calling it that. Langston Hughes did a poem called I Too, and it talked about I too am the darker brother. When company comes, they send me in the kitchen, but I eat well, I laugh, I grow strong, because tomorrow I'll be at the dinner table and then they'll be ashamed. I'm paraphrasing to get through this to say that I too is a historical version of do Black lives really matter? You know, I too am the darker brother. And so the Statue of Liberty story was, what better way to welcome immigrants than for them to see a statue paying homage to the sins of the past, where they know, wow, this is a country that's going to welcome everybody. But instead, we have the statue that's there. So the story of the Statue of Liberty has a huge misconception about immigrants. And so that's another story where Black people are like, man, when is our country ever going to reconcile and give us our just due and just acknowledge some of the past sins so we can move forward? Much like Germany has done. People sleep on Germany. A lot of what went on during the Holocaust, Germany has atoned and have come a long way to make up for what happened to 6 million Jews. And you got to give countries like that credit, because America don't even want to take that first step of having that conversation.
No, and instead,
sorry if I went long-winded.
No,
sorry.
You're fine. Instead, we kind of bury the past, and they just passed, your favorite president just passed, I think, a bill to end racial sensitivity training, and instead of promoting this, like, quote unquote patriotic education.
I know, crazy.
What the fuck is that?
What it is, it's stand back, and stand by.
Unreal.
This is going to be the new slogan going forward. But what I like about this president, though, truth be told, I like my racism on a plate. I do. I like my wholesale, like, because I feel like, man, when you know what you're up against, it's easy to prepare. What I don't like is fake liberals hiding behind so-called racists, and then you're helping maintain the status quo, but you're hiding behind liberal ideas. Sure. So for me, I know everybody, I'm telling you, I grew up in New York. I remember meeting Donald Trump at the Marquesas final when they were introducing The Apprentice. I've never been a fan of his. I grew up, the Central Park Five could have easily been me, because I was a Harlem kid that used to go in Central Park. Him putting out that page, asking for the death penalty. But I will say, he allows us to see where we are rather than where we think we are. This post-racial America that everybody thought when President Obama came crashing quick. I know, unfortunately, but fortunately. So I think we have a long way to go, but my hope is that we can stop yelling at each other and listen. And that's on both sides. I said it on the podcast that when you Black, sometimes you extra sensitive because you're used to it, and if it's someone that you can trust, but hey, bro, it's not that, and not come at you in a certain way, like what you're saying isn't valid or that you shouldn't say it. It's like, yo, I get what you're saying, but I'm not like that. Or maybe if I did do that, maybe I can improve. And then you're like, oh, okay, cool. But oftentimes it's hard for people to admit that they're benefiting from a system that has been in place to benefit them. Because then they start doing these talking points. You're like, what they got to do with getting shot 7 times in your back?
See,
what they got to do?
Not to open up a whole nother conversation here, but that's what I try to explain to people when you're used to some way of treatment, whether it's from mainstream media, whether it's from the police, whether it's just interpersonal contact, when you're used to a certain degree of, you know, whether it's talking down or, like you said, kind of taking advantage or just blatant racism or whatever, it makes it so you approach these interactions differently. So even if it is like a police interaction, right, they have to know that going into an interaction at this point with another black man, black woman, like they have to approach it differently and more sensitively, because at this point you guys are ready for this to be some fucked up incident, right? So like they're like, oh well, he shouldn't have kept walking to his car. I'm like, well, I mean, this is what he's used to, is like something bad's gonna happen, you know what I mean? Like it's a whole other can of worms. But
I appreciate you saying that, man, because I haven't you know, when I hear white people speak truth to power, I get excited, because I'm like, you know, we all have to hold each other accountable, but we ain't got to do it in a hateful way or in a antagonistic way. And to your point, what you just said, I get tired of having those. I don't even have those discussions. I know sometimes people just like, what do you mean? Why was he walking away? Like, we can make up for everything that you say when a black person gets shot. I can give you a million examples of a white person that did the opposite. Not just walked away, but was in a cop's face, telling the cop what they're not gonna do. Not just the Proud Boys. I'm talking about individual instances online on video. When you look at the standoff with the government in Vegas, with these anti-American groups, you know, these. Anyway, I just say that, you know, it's coming from a place of ignorance. Well, why didn't you do this? And well, didn't he have a shaky background? What does that have to do?
yeah,
You're in your home sleeping. You have the right to sleep and not have police bust in and murder you, and then have people go, well, I need all the facts. Well, why do you always need the facts? And you don't know the whole story when it's us getting shot. And then when it's the other way around, it's open and shut. We ain't got to do no investigation. It's just open shut. And that was what that woman in Central Park did. She knows this is a country in which Emmett Till was murdered and many others, or an allegation in which people clearly are lying. And so when you're black, you have to have you have to have video, a bunch of witnesses, and still it's like, well, you could have just. So that's why it's making those conversations with my son and the boys that I work with even harder, because you used to be able to have the 10 and 2, make sure you drive, yes sir, no sir, don't be this, you know, but now that's out the window, because you're seeing there ain't no rules. Now it's like, okay, where are we going with this? Are we leading to the second Civil War? Is that what people are wanting?
I think that's what social media is leading us to, in all honesty. That's what it feels like.
Good point.
Yeah, it
But
feels
social
like it's a
media is
lot more of like a, yeah, it's
Brendan,
too powerful.
what did you have to say? I see the green phone coming in. I want you to get in here if
You're
we're
right.
talking too much.
No, you're not talking too much at all. Your insight's greatly appreciated. But I think we've become a culture where everyone listens, but no one actually hears. So I was just kind of curious on what you're doing or what we can do just to change the narrative of the conversation, because everyone has open ears but a closed mind, right? So how do we break down that barrier?
So Brendan, couple things. I'm gonna say, all my young boys, when I talk and I say something, they always go bars. You spitting bars, and I love it. I wish I've heard them before, but I love hearing them. And you probably are a hip hop fan, so I would probably like you even more.
Yes.
But
Yeah, just a bit.
yeah, no, I hear it because anyway, to your point, I think what folks can do, like what I always try to do, I always try to find, if it's someone I'm trying to reach, I do my best. I don't always succeed. Sometimes I fail. But what I try to do is I try to see what is something in their background that they can relate to. So obviously, you're not going to be able to relate to me as a black man, my history. But if you're Jewish, I might be able to use the Holocaust. Or if you're white and Anglo, I may be able to use, if we self-disclose and get to know, I may be able to use something in your past that where you were bullied or discriminated for whatever reason. Or if I use a history point of view and go, you know, if your family's from Italy, right? If they immigrated here, think about the Irish, how they were treated when they first got. They obviously weren't treated as bad as we were, but in terms of, you look at the hierarchy of white, you know, Irish were treated like crap. So if you're Irish, maybe we can start with a conversation of having a lineage of understanding what it's like for us, you know, one of those things. And if not that, yo, like we just keep saying, there's enough stuff on in Google, online for people if they really want to have I mean, but you can always tell when someone really wants to have a conversation. I would say don't engage with people who are going to waste your time on social media or in real life, because you get dragged in and you're like, why am I tired? What am I doing talking to this most ignorant person? It's like Mitch McConnell. Like for him to say, no, I'm only using for example, and he's a dirtbag. I'm not a big fan of his, but I respect authority. What I'm saying is he blatantly said, we ain't passing nothing that Obama, like for me, for you to be a sitting senator to say that, to me is almost treasonous. But I say that because that's somebody, you know, you're not even going to sit at the table. And I felt like President Obama tried to capitulate and win people over. And it's like, you got to know there are some people, it ain't even worth wasting your breath. They are who they are. They're not changing. And I use them just because those are two figures everyone knows. When you have people who are like, we are not going to pass a single bill in your presidency, and the American public can hear that and be okay with it, where do you go from there? It really has to start with people who are at least willing to come and engage and go, all right, you know, like Muhammad Ali, another quote he always told his daughters was, don't raise your voice, just improve your argument. You ain't got to holler and scream. Just bring receipts.
That guy was a soundbite machine, man.
All day, wasn't he?
Unreal.
All day. Him and my guy right here.
Bruce.
Yeah. I'm a big
So
Bruce.
I don't want to take up too much more of your time. Hopefully maybe
I'm good, man.
Someday. But I was touching base with Russ Swan the other day, and he told me I need to ask you that Russ wants to know, why did that put all the brothers in the same room? I have no idea what that means, but that's what I'm supposed to ask you.
Yo, so first of all, Russ, shout out to Russ and Dreams. Early on Survivor, we used to go to these you know, fundraising things throughout the country.
Sure.
They were really dope. Weren't that many survivors, but when we got together, it was like those stories, man, if only the public knew. Like the super fans, guys like my man Mike Albrecht and what's his name that's always doing the deuces? I can't think of my brain. But anyway, they would know because they would all be in the mix. They were so much fun, but they Mertz.
Oh, never. Oh, Mertz. Yeah.
Mertz, yeah, he's like big super Survivor fan. Anyway, they put the brothers in one room. It was myself, Russ, and Dreams getting to know each other. But it was dope because, you know, we bonded, we laughed. It was just dope, man. And since then, I had a profound respect for that brother and Dreams. And the thing is, when you bond with somebody, you ain't got to speak to them for years. You just pick off where you left off.
Sure. And
so that's the good thing about good energy with people, is that it's not how much time, it's the minute you connect, you already know that this is going to be somebody that's connected. So shout out to Russ.
That's beautiful. So I want you to know, let's see if you can see this picture here. I'm doing my part with my kiddos. I don't know if you can see that.
Oh,
she's got the anti-racist baby book.
Oh, that's dope, man.
I read it to her and to my 3.5-year-old. So, yeah, I'm doing my part. I hope other people do as well. This was such an enlightening, fantastic conversation. I got to say, I don't think I've ever done one longer than 1 hour and 10 minutes. So I'm sorry that I took that alone time that you thought you were going to get and took it away from you.
I'm good.
Great.
I'm good. This is good. Well, two things I'll say in closing. Thank you for being an ally. I think that picture speaks 1,000 words. For you to be proactive and start at home. I think everyone always thinks they have to go out. What can I do? You know, always start with the man in the mirror, and you can start with your own family. So shout out to you and your wife. Thank you for being an ally and being open to this. And beautiful. You and Brendan, even though I can't see his face, y'all exude such a dope and cool energy. So shout out to you guys for helping to make this conversation.
Yeah, I put that picture on Twitter. My guy, he's my most recent favorite survivor, Wendell. He actually retweeted it. I thought that was pretty cool.
He retweeted what?
That picture. I put it on Twitter, and he actually retweeted it. The anti-racist baby. That's my dude right there.
Yeah, man. So I feel honored. I didn't even notice the time because if I don't feel comfortable, I'm aware of time.
Yeah.
Like, all right. So.
Yeah, Brandon, what were you about to say?
I was just going to thank Sean for all of his time. I know it's a huge commitment out of your day, but man, are you very well versed in your history and very enlightening. And I think Brandon and I can both say we learned a lot just from your conversation.
Yo, man, I know what I know, and I don't know what I don't know. I don't try to spit facts to prove how smart I am. I'm not into doing that. There's so many people way smarter than me. I just know to whom much is given, much is required. And because a lot of people rely on me, I have to make sure I arm people with truth and a sense of history and a sense of, prove me wrong. And not for the sake of debating, but just so we can get to truth. So any encounter with me, as I said on the show, I give God all the glory, man. And I take anything bad, I'll take the hits. If I say anything to insult somebody, I'm like that in my personal life. If I say something that may hurt people's feelings, I'm always the first to be like, I'm sorry, whether they want it or not. And if I say anything good or inspiring that can lead you to understand God more and know that he's in all of us, then I say, so if you learned, felt inspired, man, I give God all the glory. And I mean that. I ain't saying that to sound like some soundbite or some quote on a shirt. I give God all the glory because I know from where my blessings come. And if you were blessed by this, man, and especially Brandon, you showing me your beautiful family, because I'm such a kid. I love babies, and I feel humbled, and I feel like I've learned listening to some of your discourse, Brandon, and even being allowed to talk about the things that we talked about today. So thank you.
So yeah, this was beautiful. I appreciate every minute of it. I try to close every episode of these with just a recommendation from our guests. So whether it's a book you read, a TV show you liked, a song you love, a lyric you like, a Twitter follow, any of that sort of stuff, any sort of recommendation.
Ooh, man, wish I'd have saw that coming.
Yeah, I forgot.
Man, these are my friends here, man. I always tell I've put to my son. This is what I'm leaving him most of my books. I would say always start with the autobiography of Malcolm X. To understand Black malehood, and anything by James Baldwin. You can pick up any book by James Baldwin and be enlightened. He's one of the greatest writers of our time. In terms of if you're not a reader, I would say listen to this for a second. With all this extra stressing, the question I wonder is after death, after my last breath, when will I finally get to rest through this suppression? They punish the people that's asking questions and those that possess. Still from the ones without possession, the message I stress. To make it stop, study your lesson, don't settle for less. Even the genius ask question, be grateful for blessings. Don't ever change, keep your essence. The power is in the people. In politics we address. Always do your best. And never let the pressure, always do your best. Always do your best. Don't let the pressure make you panic. And when you get stranded and things don't go the way you planned it, dreaming of riches in a position of making a difference. Politicians and hypocrites, they don't want to listen. If I'm insane, it's the fame made a brother change. It was nothing like the game. It's just me against the world. That's Tupac Shakur. I would say to anyone, take a look at some of Tupac's songs, good and bad, complex as it is. If you're not into reading, grab one of that young man's lyrics, with the music or without, break it down, and you'll get an insight of what it's like to be a Black man in America, or just another perspective that may help you understand.
I love that, and I wish I had a mic to drop on that one.
That wasn't planned either. That's one of my I use Pac in a lot of my hip hop lessons, and that particular one, that line, that verse, always struck me because when you break it down, there's so much history and politics in there. So to your question, any book by James Baldwin, the autobiography of Malcolm X, anything by Tupac if you're into music. I can't really think of much else. I read and dissect more than just Black culture and literature, but if you're asking me to give people something to understand, and definitely Toni Morrison.
All right.
Throw my mind. So thank you guys.
Oh, this was lovely. Beautiful, beautiful conversation. Thank you, Sean.
Thank you, Sean, so much.
Thank you for tuning in to another can't miss episode of Just a Couple Dudes or Jacked Podcast. We're new on Twitter, so please give us a follow at JAKDpod. On Instagram, you can follow us at JAKD_podcast, and we have a new YouTube channel set up at Just a Couple Dudes, and that's couple with a K.
We also have a website, jakdpod.com, with a new store set up where you can check out our merch and other fun items that we're going to be putting up. So please give us a follow, check out our website, and tune in for the next podcast that we'll be releasing shortly. Thanks.